The Independent Electoral Commission is gearing up for this year's local government elections. During previous polls, there were allegations of double voting due to a shortage of permanent ink used to mark voters. Well, to find out what steps are being taken this time around to mitigate this, we are joined this lunchtime by Masego Shiburi, the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer of the Independent Electoral Commission, that's the IEC. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us at this lunchtime. Masego, have you put in place, can you assure South Africans that you won't face similar allegations like we saw in 2019 from some political parties who took part in the general election of 2019 of double voting?
Good afternoon. We have since looked at all reported cases or allegations of double voting, and those were presented to court. In the majority of the cases, the court could not find evidence of either people having voted more than they were entitled to. There are still a number of cases that are still in the court process, and we will update the South African public once those are concluded.
How could double voting take place, Mr. Mishuru? Why would people have made those allegations and the court has not found any veracity to them? How could it happen possibly that I could double vote?
The allegations as they emerged on voting day were that because in some instances we had challenges with the quality of the indelible ink, in that it could be removed by the use of normal household detergents, or that where people had applied substances on their thumbs, it vitiated the bonding properties of that ink. So in that context, it was theoretically possible for a person to present themselves at another voting station. And again, in the context of national and provincial election, there is a provision that allows a person to vote at a voting station where they are not registered, on producing proof that they are a registered voter and that they find themselves outside the voting district in which they are registered, and also make a statement to the effect that they have not participated in that election. That was an exception to the law to allow people who, for example, people who work in emergency services, people who drive trucks, who find themselves outside of their areas of registration, to be able to continue to participate wherever they found themselves in the Republic on voting day. So for the elections that we're going to...
Yes, carry on, sir.
Thank you, sir. For the 2021 elections of municipal councils, a person can only register and vote at a single voting station. So if you are outside of the area in which you are ordinarily resident, you will unfortunately not be able to participate in the election in any other voting station. So that's the first control measure. And we also have other control measures, which means the person's name appears only on one segment of the voter's roll. And when they vote, their name is scratched from that segment and they have indelible ink applied to their thumb. We will also introduce for the first time a live voters roll, where we will then tick those persons against our database, so that even if the person were to present themselves at another voting station, they would not be able to vote, because we have the capability going forward of maintaining an online voters roll that is updated as and when people vote.
And the quality of the ink, the indelible ink this time around, because it was questionable in 2019.
We have looked at the indelible ink with the assistance of the CSIR, and there are a number of improvements that we are occasioning in the formula of the ink. We are also testing that the use of sanitizers would not vitiate the efficacy of that ink. So even in that area, we are recording improvements on the quality of the ink without unnecessarily exposing voters to harm, because the more silver nitrate you add to the indelible ink, you may be exposing people to harm. So we found a comfortable balance, and we also have a regime of testing that ink more rigorously than we did in the past election.
Yeah, because most sanitizers use alcohol, are supposed to have at least 70% alcohol content for them to be effective against the coronavirus. And the pandemic itself, I mean, has presented a number of headaches, I'm sure, for you. You've had a number of by-elections since the arrival of the coronavirus on our shores, and that experience should assist you. What have you learned?
We have drawn a number of lessons from our by-elections. We have also drawn lessons from other international jurisdictions that had elections in the context of COVID. One, it is possible to hold an election in the context of COVID if there's a strict adherence to non-therapeutic measures to limit the spread of the virus. We can confirm that the use of sanitizers at the entrance and exit of the voting station is helpful. Provisioning of PPE to our staff also helps, and insistence that every voter must maintain social distance and also wear a mask or a face covering also helps. We have also jettisoned the use of the indelible ink pens that we've used in the past, because we use those on multiple voters. Now we use ink, and we use an ink applicator that we only use once and discard, and we don't share the applicator among various voters. So that those measures, we think, will give the voting public assurance that their health is not at risk, while they still maintain the safeguards that are necessary to ensure that the elections are free, fair and credible.
Will the internal buildings of the voting stations or the tents that you'll set up in different parts of the country be also subjected to some form of sanitization as voting day begins?
When we tested our measures in the November and December by-election, what we did as part of the materials we provide to each voting station, we provide fogging sprays that we use 30 minutes before the opening of the station. We'll use one at the close of the station, so that when we return the facility to its owner, if it's a school, when kids come the following day, that facility is decontaminated. Indeed, I confirm that we will be using decontamination measures to safeguard the public health of voters.
The implementation of social distancing and the COVID-19 protocols in terms of controlling how numbers of people who gather at one location might have an impact on the voting day. Do you anticipate, and would you be considering 2 days of voting?
We have begun discussions to look at all avenues that will make it possible to hold these elections in a manner that guarantees public health, but also guarantees the outcomes of those elections. You will recall that we have a dispensation for special votes. In other words, persons who, for a myriad of reasons, are unable to present themselves at the voting station, those category of persons have an ability to apply for special vote, and if they are approved, they can vote on 2 days before the election day. We're looking at whether we could look at longer voting hours, or whether there could be a combination of depopulating voters to vote on those 2 voting days preceding the election date. However, in terms of the law, a voting day is a single day which must be determined, and the date set by the Minister of Cooperative Governance. We are not looking at extending the voting day, but looking at how we can use already days that are available in terms of the election calendar to depopulate voting stations.
When will the election take place?
The election must take place between the 4th of August and the 1st of November 2021. The minister responsible for cooperative governance is the authority responsible for determining the date and calling those elections.
Okay, Mr. Shiburi, thank you very much. He's, of course, the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer at the IEC.